The New York Jets, one of the most struggling franchises in the NFL over the past decade, saw an improvement last season. Both having the offensive and defensive rookie of the year, the team saw an increase in wins despite not making the postseason. Now, after a very successful offseason, the Jets are aiming higher and higher. For fantasy football, did this team validate themselves to fantasy players? Let's find out. How is everyone doing today? My name is Aaron and this is the Game Day Hour. Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Team Review. In this series, we take a look at each and every 32 NFL franchises and see what they offer for fantasy football. Here we analyze the team's quarterback, running back, wide receiver 1 and 2, tight end, and starting kicker. Our goal is to analyze last season and see if these players are worth drafting, and if so, when and where. Today, we check out the New York Jets.
Aaron Rodgers, New York Jets quarterback.
Talk about an off season. The Packers were basically done with Aaron Rodgers, and I think we all know that by now. When you see the past few drafts that the Packers were doing, it was clear that they were setting the way for Jordan Love, and they were ready to push out Aaron Rodgers. And the last season was a very ugly season for the Packers and Rodgers, and now after an offseason where the Jets basically did everything to get Aaron Rodgers, now we take a look at what the Jets really got. Let's see Rodgers' stats from last season. He played 17 games last year, which is somewhat hard to believe knowing that Jordan Love played 4, but in those 17 games he had 350 completions, which is 10th, 524 attempts, which is also 10th, but when it came to percentage, he was 64.6% in his passes. That's 21st. That's not really good for what Aaron Rodgers can normally do. He had 3,695 passing yards. That's 11th. He had 26 touchdowns, which was top 10. That was 7th. He had 12 interceptions, which was completely out of nowhere because normally this guy has 4 to 6 interceptions a year. That was tied for 105th. And lastly, he was 13th in total fantasy points with 286. And again, we're doing PPR, as always. So even despite having a bad season last year with a below-average receiving core, which the Packers did not address, and that's where I thought that the line was drawn, and that's why they couldn't play very well, because Rodgers didn't have an amazing receiving core. That's kind of why these stats are so low. But even then, they're still like top 10 in certain places, top 15 in most places. So with that said, would I draft him? Yes. However, I see him more as a quarterback too because he does have a younger receiving core, so it's going to take a while, or take a little bit at least, to establish a connection with people like Wilson. He already has a established connection with Alan Lazard, but with the tight end, Conklin, and the other receivers, I see him in rounds 7 through 11, and among all quarterbacks, he's ranked 14th, and even though he's ranked 14th, you can still make a case that he's a quarterback 1, but he would probably be a pretty late draft pick, and because of that, I have him as a quarterback 2. So my last thoughts on Aaron Rodgers is new team, new faces, a new environment. He's going to be hope for the New York Jets. It's kind of like what Brett Favre did, so you're seeing a similar path being walked here. And I believe that Aaron Rodgers will have a pretty good season. I don't think he's going to put up incredible stats, but I think the interceptions will go down first. And I don't know if I would see the passing yards or the touchdowns going up, but hey, maybe. I think Rodgers will be a pretty reliable quarterback to have. I just don't know if I would rely on him as a QB1, but maybe.
Breece Hall, New York Jets running back.
I would actually call him one of the hottest players in the NFL at the time until his injury, but Breece Hall was on the verge of being the offensive player of the year. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered. It was going to go to a Jet, and I thought that it was going to be Breece at first until he got injured because I thought he was playing out of his mind. And because of how he was playing, if at a fully healthy Breece Hall, he is a very dangerous player. So let's take a look at the stats he did from last season. So you can't really blame the man for having these low stats. He's played less than 10 games. So he has 80 carries, 463 rushing yards, and 4 touchdowns. He had 19 receptions for 218 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. And despite not playing many games, he had 111 total fantasy points, which was tied for 41st. So, in all legitimacy, he could have had top 10, maybe even top 20 stats, somewhere in that range. And I wouldn't doubt it. If he played a full season, I believe those stats would happen. And because of that, my projections for him are pretty high. Is he somebody I would draft? Yes. As a matter of fact, he's one of the running backs I'm taking a look at with this upcoming fantasy season coming up. I see him as a running back 1 through 2, a low 1, a high 2, being in rounds 2 through 6. And he's ranked 13th among all running backs in the league. And that's in a top 50 running back rating that I have. I have him as 13. And I believe that if he could stay healthy, and I'm not going to put an injury warning because it was his first injury. So I give an injury warning to somebody who has a history of it, and he's somebody who I wouldn't have on an injury warning. I think he could be something special, and he might be something very well needed for Aaron Rodgers. You might even see his receiving stats go up. And if that's the case, he's another Aaron Jones. Maybe even better, who knows. But I would take a good long while about drafting him because if he indeed does have an injury warning, that is something you guys want to know, but I would pick him up personally. Maybe not round 1, but round 2 potentially.
Garrett Wilson, New York Jets wide receiver 1.
One of the more surprising players for me last year because I thought the best wide receiver would be Chris Olave. And Olave was still a very good receiver, but it's easy to say that Garrett Wilson was a better receiver overall. So let's take a look at what Garrett did last year with some other quarterbacks who are not named Aaron Rodgers. So last year he played 17 games. He had 83 receptions. That was 20th. He had 1,103 receiving yards, which is 15th. 4 touchdowns, which was tied for 46th. And he had 209 total fantasy points, which was 21st. As a rookie, and the amount of big time receivers in this league are just endless. So being 21st in those stats is huge. And now, because he did those stats under 2 other quarterbacks last season that were not named Aaron Rodgers, this year he's going to have Aaron Rodgers. And because of that, is he a wide receiver I would draft? Yes. He is a wide receiver 1 and 2. I would see him being drafted in rounds 3 through 5. He's ranked 12th among all wide receivers. Normally, we talk about this whole wide receiver quarterback concept when teams go get wide receivers like the Bills did with Stephon Diggs or the Eagles did with A.J. Brown or the Miami Dolphins with Tyreek Hill. And now we see it the opposite way. What happens when a team goes grabs a quarterback with a big wide receiver on their team? Maybe the concept's different or maybe it's the same or even better. So because of that, I would draft Garrett Wilson because I would want to see many wide receivers under Aaron Rodgers and under this new system. The Jets' first 3 players are big names and prospects to draft 1s and 2s, and Wilson is one of the best.
Allen Lazard, New York Jets wide receiver 2.
Along with Aaron Rodgers came his number 1 target at Green Bay, Allen Lazard. Lazard was not a great wide receiver as a wide receiver 1, and he was a wide receiver 1 for 1 year at Green Bay after Devontae Adams moved on to Las Vegas. But now that he's returning back to the wide receiver 2 position, I think things for him will change. So let's talk about Lazard last season. Last year he played 15 games with the Packers. He had 60 receptions, which was tied for 51st. He had 788 receiving yards, that's 39th. 6 touchdowns, which was tied for 24th. And he had 167 total fantasy points, which was 33rd. Now, last season, I think I would say that Christian Watson was more impressive for Rodgers, and he was a rookie then. And Lazard, well, he didn't play every game, so you can't fault him on the stats, kind of. But now that he's back in the wide receiver 2 position, I think he is a better, reliable wide receiver for that position specifically. However, he's still ranked pretty low. I have him as a probably. I only say probably because it depends on who's on the board and if I feel he really is going to be that big name for the Jets. But I have him as a wide receiver 4 in rounds 11 through 15 if he is somebody I would draft. And I have him ranked 46th among all wide receivers. I'm not going to say I wouldn't draft Lazard, but I just don't know. Maybe as a wide receiver 2, I'll change my mind. But last year, as a wide receiver 1, I didn't have that high a prospect for him. So Again, he's ranked very much lower on this list, but he's still somebody who could potentially be a free agency pickup or a very late draft pick, depending on how the year for the Jets is going on. So I would monitor Lazard's situation as the season progresses, but I don't know if I would draft him.
Tyler Conklin, New York Jets tight end.
For Rodgers, tight ends have always been a big thing, and even though Robert Tonyan wasn't a huge tight end, Rodgers made some good work with him and made him a very valuable tight end for fantasy. Is he going to do the same with Tyler Conklin? Well, let's first take a look at Conklin's stats. So he played 17 games last year. He had 58 receptions, which was tied for 56th. He had 552 receiving yards, which was 69th. And he had 3 touchdowns, which was tied for 65th. He had 124 total fantasy points. That was 16th among all tight ends. And again, remember who was throwing to him. Not very good. And because of that, Rodgers is potentially going to put this guy as a top 20 tight end. If he was last year, he'll probably be it this year. The only question is, how much of a security blanket does he become? Which then leads me to the projections. Would I draft him? Yes. To me, he's a tight end too, and he's a low draft pick for me because it's his first year with Rodgers. Let's see how he does. But I would have him as rounds 12 through 15. I have him ranked 20th among all tight ends. That's subject to change and go upwards depending on what Rodgers does. But I think this is not more about Tyler Conklin and his skills, but more or less about who's throwing the ball to him. If both prove to be well, he could go up as close to a very low tight end 1. That's where I would have him as the lowest projection. At a high projection base is a low first round. If he is that guy for Rodgers, he needs to be a security blanket though. But besides that, I don't think I would draft him just yet. I would hold off on Conklin, but as far as, and it's probably because of my league, but I would draft him if I was in the normal fantasy league, and that's where I draft him in the tight end 2 position.
Greg Zuerlein, New York Jets kicker.
Lastly, we have Greg Zuerlein. And Zuerlein used to be a former Ram, a former Cowboy. He's been with the Jets. This is going to be year 2 with New York. And one of the better kickers in the league. However, he hasn't had a pretty good season for a few years now since he's left the Rams. So let's see how good Greg Zuerlein was last year. He played 17 games. He was 30 for 37, which is 81.1%. That's 31st. But he's made 30 field goals, so that's a lot of points made. He has 96.6% of extra point percentage, which is 19th. That's not that great. He had a long as 60, that's tied for 3rd, and 118 points, that's tied for 13th. He had 130 total fantasy points, which was 12th. So he's putting up the stats of a kicker 2, but we know he's capable of a kicker 1. He has been that before. He's been the best kicker at one point in the NFL. And he is somebody I would draft. I would draft him as a kicker 1 or 2 in rounds 8 through 15, depending on when my priority of kickers begins to jump in line. I wouldn't pick a kicker early if I was going for heavy offensive weapons and maybe a better defense. But let's say we get towards the bottom of the kicker 1s, I'd probably pick him up because I have him ranked 10th among all kickers. So for me, I think he is a safe pick to have as a 1 or 2. It doesn't really matter, but he's better than a lot of kickers, so I wouldn't be too worried about picking up this guy. And that'll do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you can get notifications when my videos go up. And I have the Dolphins and the Bills video. I'm going to try to get these 3 videos, this plus the next 2, done by next Sunday, which is in a few days. So I'll hopefully have a lot more content for you guys, and then we'll start with the NFC East afterwards. So I hope you guys have a great day. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.